Hello, hello. So my name is Michelle and I recently turned 50. Recently meaning like November, but it's still very new. I've waited a long time to be 50, so I'm probably going to say that for a little bit. But I wanted to share my experience about how I was able to retire early. If you've seen a video, I think I made it like 2 years ago, and it was talking about how I went from full-time teaching to part-time teaching. I'll include that down at the bottom in the description, but I feel like I need to scoot back some. Okay, so I'll include that, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. So right after COVID, almost during COVID, is when I started getting like super duper frustrated with teaching. I had left teaching before. I was probably like 10 years in, and I left and I went and worked for an educational technology company. And there were a lot of things I liked, but a lot of things I didn't like. So I ended up coming back to education. And so over the course of my teaching career, I think I taught maybe 17 years in elementary, 4 in middle, and probably about 4-ish in high. So for the last 4 years, I was a high school English teacher. So what happened after COVID is I got exposed to the FIRE movement, which if you're not familiar with what that is, it's financial independence, retire early. And it was this idea that these engineers had figured out if you invest like 70 to 80% of your income in like index funds and mutual funds within 10 years, you'd have enough money from the dividends, I guess, that you could like live off of that. Well, because I was already so far into my career, I mean, I barely had 10 years left to retire. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to do that. But I was like, I wonder if I could live on half of what I make. And it just so happens that at the time, the middle school I worked at was this wonderful lady, and she worked part-time. And I started really picking her brain because, of course, most times, especially if you're in the United States, we're so geared towards full-time work that we don't even realize that's really not actually a necessity, but we're just so used to everybody working full-time that when we meet someone who isn't or doesn't work full-time, we're kind of like, what's up with them? If I'm wheezing, I'm so sorry. I took me some honey. Oh, excuse me, but this pollen is kicking my butt. So anyway, so I started talking to her and I was kind of like, hey, so are you like trying to find a full-time job, or like what made you go part-time? And she was like, well, she has a business and she's a wife and she has 3 kids, and she just felt like this was more conducive to her schedule and her family could afford to, take the pay cut. And I was like, so you make half of what you normally make? She was like, yep. And she said that, she still got benefits. She was still paying into the retirement system. So I was like, oh, So I am someone who, when I set out on a goal, I tell everybody. And I know sometimes there's people who feel like you shouldn't tell people. I tell people. And the reason why I tell people is because I know that God moves through people and he can bless me through someone else. So if I tell you, hey, you know what, I'm really looking for a part-time job, then if you hear somebody, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I know somebody who's looking for a part-time job. And that's exactly what happened. So summer of 2021, I worked summer school, and I kind of got to interact a lot with the 8th graders. I was the person who was like coordinating the technology lab. And so I got to interact with every kid who was in summer school. I got to interact with every teacher. Yes, this was strategic. I'm very strategic with my goals. Yes, it was. I know I'm very personable, but if I get to work with everybody in the building, that means that I get to tell everybody who's at summer school that I want to work part-time. And I don't know about your district if you're watching this as a teacher, but there's teachers from like all different schools at one summer school site, so to speak. So I'm telling people, I got to make some connections. And so my assistant principal, she had been moved from that school, but that's how I met her. She reached out and was like, hey, there's a high school part-time position. And I was like, oh, I don't know about high school because I had never taught high school before. So I was like, oh, I don't know. But because I was interacting with the 8th graders who would soon be 9th graders, and I was like, it's probably not going to be that bad. Let me go ahead and take the test. So I ended up taking like the business ad test on like a Monday and the English test on like a Tuesday. Now, backstory, I am a really good multiple choice test taker. So that's 1. 2, I am a risk taker. on anybody's scale, I'm a risk taker. And I say that to tell you that if you're not inherently a risk taker, then of course, me sharing my story, it might sound like scary. It might be inspiring. You might be like, oh, I could do that. But I'm telling you now, I did not become a risk taker at 50. Like, I'm someone who I've always been a risk taker. I left my hometown to move away to somewhere where I knew like two people. I am the person who I will quit a job before I have another job lined up. So yes, I probably would fit in perfectly with this current generation because I've been doing this for years. So I say that so that you kind of can frame it as, okay, I'm always taking risk because my feeling is I can always try. And if it doesn't work, I can always go back to kind of what everybody else is doing. So that was my feeling about the part-time teaching. If I could get a part-time teaching job, if I couldn't afford it, then I would just go back, but at least I could try. So I ended up getting a position at a high school, and it was so cool because, and it really pays to, show up and be friendly and personable, because one of the girls from summer school actually knew one of the people who was interviewing me. And she was able to say like, oh my gosh, she's here at summer school and, she's helping, she's doing this, da, 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 da. I think she'd be a great asset. So it was wonderful. So needless to say, I get that job. So I told my students this, I wasn't really believing that this was going to turn into like a lifestyle. So I thought, because I had just bought a Tesla, because since the pandemic was, kind of over, I was like, teachers are dropping like flies, but just if I'm one of them, at least I want to say I've driven my dream car. Happy to say I am no longer driving around in that car. Thank God, because who it's connected to now, he's just, ugh. It had some safety issues. Once I realized they could control the car remotely, I was like, okay, I'm good. Let me go on back to something a little less technical. So anyway, I'm at the high school, 4 years part-time. Well, my first year in, I had saved. So I had worked summer school, and then I had been saving because I had kind of decided January of 2021 that by August I wanted to be part-time. So I was able to pull that off. Now, not without some scary moments though. So that's what I want to be honest about, because oftentimes people who know me in real life, it just looks like my stuff is working out. It just looks like, oh my gosh, she's speaking stuff into existence. She's like queen of manifesting. I don't know. I do speak very positively and things do tend to happen, but they are not without hiccups. So as far as that part-time position goes, y'all, I'm in the Southeast, which means we go back to school end of July. Like teachers go back end of July, kids go back sometimes like August 1st. So it's pretty early. Summer school ends. Y'all, I have no job. Okay. Now, of course, at this point, I probably have 9 or 10 certifications. I think I'm up to like 11 now. I'm definitely a professional student. So I have a bunch of certifications. I can teach a bunch of different grade levels. My area of expertise is definitely literacy, but I can also do like technology and stuff like that. Y'all, it is like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before school starts. And I'm like, I don't have a job. I do not have a job. So at this point, I get nervous. So I start applying for full-time positions because I'm like, okay, I need a job. It just so happened that I did get offered 2 full-time positions. But I am just a person who, I don't know if you believe in God or the universe or whatever you want to call it. I believe in God, and I'm just like, Lord, I'm going to trust you. I really do believe in that spirit of discernment and intuition. And I was like, I'm going to trust you, because I knew that if I didn't trust him then I wouldn't even take the risk. So I waited it out, and it just so happened that I did pass the English test. I did get offered the job in high school. So I did have a job lined up. So I was like, oh, okay. So what happens though is when you go part-time, you are literally making half. So what happened was, like, my July paycheck was amazing because of course I had worked summer school, but then that August paycheck, it was like half. And unfortunately for me, I am not someone who is super duper good with money. I've gotten better in the last 4 years. I've always been kind of someone who likes to find deals and save, but I'm not someone who knows my numbers. I'm really, really working on that. As far as like, if you asked me, oh, what are your total bills? I don't know. All I know is how much money I bring home, and that tends to equal whatever my expenses are. So I've gotten a little better. But it's also shown me that I was wasting tons and tons and tons and tons of money. So the first thing I can tell you is that you need way less than you think you do to live a happy life. Because what I found is when I went from full time to part time, I didn't realize that my son and I, we were probably spending 1,500 to 2,000 a month on food. Like, I'm not a big cook. We go out. Sometimes he might have a taste for steak. I might have a taste for shrimp. That might be two different restaurants. And because it's just he and the doggy, of course, I wasn't even keeping up with that. And so once I went part time, I was able to like dial it back. Still not as much as I would have liked to. Like, I'm still really working on that right now. But that was the first thing is like, and mind you, I had just bought the Tesla. So I was like, there's no way in the world I'm going to pull this off. But I was able to pull it off. So I'm leaving something out. So I did have my grandmother's house at that point. So I had one property and it was Section 8 at the time. And at that time, I was making like $700 a month. Business skills, zero. So was I building up reserves connected to that house? Absolutely not. I was just spending every dollar I had. So even when I was calculating my budget from going full time to part time, I was counting all the 700, not thinking, Michelle, you might need to save like 100 for repairs or, 100 for grass, none of that. So after the first year, and I realized, I think I could pull this off. I already had a TPT store from like probably 7 or 8 years beforehand, but hadn't really done anything with it. Like, I think I had like 4 or 5 products. So I went all in on that. And then I started really focusing on my real estate. So then I created like a business and I was like, okay, I'm going to really get into this. But I also was like, I needed money like in real time. So I tried all sorts of side hustles, y'all, in the last, 4 years of working part-time. I mean, I became a notary. So ridiculous. I didn't even buy the stamp, y'all. So I've never notarized anything. I did babysitting. I worked the gate for like the sporting events at high school. And I must say that was really one of the things that helped me pull this off is that in high school, there's a lot of different ways you can make money. So I was doing like standardized testing. I was working the gate. I was doing Saturday tutoring. I mean, I was doing every possible thing I could to make ends meet. So once I figured out kind of my bills, and I'm not going to say that there were not some dings because the house that I was renting, the Section 8 house, the tenant's child, they were eating paint off the walls. The house is like over close to 100 years old. Of course, it's lead paint. Then I get dinged. It cost me, about 20,000 to fix that issue. But the problem was I didn't have the luxury of that full-time income anymore. And so I got in credit card debt. I took out personal loans. I defaulted. So honey, when I say it looks like it's working, it's like this because credit is garbage. When I say garbage, now it's getting a little better. Like I'm back in the sixes, at least like mid sixes, which I'm like ecstatic about because there was a point over these last 4 years that I think my credit score was like a 412 or 450 or it was something for something. And I was like, oh, sweet Jesus. And so let me keep it moving. So just know that there's been some ups and downs. This has not all been just rainbows and sunshine. So after working part-time, I would say for about 3 years, I just realized that I love teaching. I love helping kids. I loved my high school babies so much. But just the bureaucratic shenanigans of teaching was just a lot for me at this age. I think between menopause and having done it for a minute and it was just a lot. And if you're a teacher, you already know we do not make a whole lot of money. Now, do not get me wrong. If I was working full time as a teacher, I think I would have been at like 6 figures. I would have been at low sixes, maybe like 101,000. So 50,000 working part time is not bad, y'all. So I'm not trying to make it like, that's a horrible thing because my schedule was 7:45 to 11:45. So it was good stuff. However, I just was like, okay, this is crazy. Like I am, pinching pennies. I don't really want to come back full time because it's just too much. Between the kids are very different now. You're fussing at kids every 5 minutes about get off your phone. And then I just tend to work better alone. because I'm very type A. So, I like stuff done and I have schedules and I have routines. And so I admit I'm not the most flexible. I'm very efficient, but I'm definitely not the most flexible. So, that was stressing me. And because I was part-time, like, unlike my colleagues, like, I don't have a planning time. So anytime anybody wants to switch course, when am I making these corrections on my own free time, which is cutting into the time that I could be making money? So it was just ridiculous. So anyway, I want to say last March of 2024 is when I was like, okay, you know what? I don't know how much longer I can do this. Also, I was just getting more anxious about the school shootings because we all know that, like, they're not stopping. As a teacher, you're kind of just holding your breath about, please, Lord, don't let it be my school, and I was just like, okay, what else can I do? I had 8 years left before I could retire. And it's so good to be around young people because I was talking to my son, who at the time was 17, and I was like, oh, I guess I can do it. It's 8 years. It's only part-time. I probably just need to change my mindset and da, 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 da. And my son was like, 8 years is a long time. And I was like, you think? He was like, yeah, look at all the stuff you've done in the past 8 years. And I was like, you know what? Thank you. Because I hadn't thought about that. And I was like, you know what? 8 years is a ridiculously long time to be doing something that you're already like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do this. So last March, I had decided, okay, if I subbed like 12 or 13 days out the month, and you can sub, there's usually 20 school days a month, that I would be able to cover my bills. So I was like, perfect, that's what I'm going to do. Because in my mind, I thought, oh, well, if I wasn't here for 4 to 5 hours a day, then I could be working on my real estate business. I could be looking up grants. I could be taking class. Like, I had these just delusions of grandeur, so to speak, of the person I would be, the businesswoman I would be if I wasn't stuck teaching 4 or 5 hours. Unfortunately, that's not what happened, but we'll get to that. So by April, because I was part-time, my principal came to me and was like, hey, we have bad news. Your position has been eliminated. We actually have to lose a full-time teacher and your position. And I was like, ooh, okay, but no worries, because I've already worked this out. Like, I'm going to sub, but thank you so much. Matter of fact, I might come back and sub here. At the time, one of my colleagues was pregnant. So I was like, I could come back and be a supply teacher for her and, the whole nine. And then just casually, I threw out there, though, however, if there was a way that I could be a singleton, which is on an island by myself with some children, I would love to come back. And since I have all this elementary school experience, like, is there a way that, like, we could create some sort of remedial reading or writing program? And one of the side hustles that I had tried, sorry, my eyes are itching. I know some people would edit this out, y'all, but I'm not. Y'all get to see it. So what was I saying? Oh, one of the side hustles I tried. So one of the things I had tried was this software, because in one of my previous lives, I had taught teachers how to use educational software. So that's one of my babies. My most recent degree is in instructional technology. So, like, technology is one of my babies. So I was like, yes, let's try it. So I tried the program out for like 2 years, worked out the tweaks. And so what they ended up doing was creating a position for me where I would be teaching writing and I would be funneling that program in. So it was like a remedial writing class. So I was excited, but I also felt like the Holy Spirit was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? This is not the plan. What are you doing? But, I was like, no, maybe I can make this work. Because I really just didn't want to let go of teaching because it's such a big part of my identity. I kind of felt like, what am I going to do? Like, if I'm not, a teacher, I've been a teacher, since I was 22, 23. So that's been such a gigantic part of my identity. So anyway, I teach summer school again. I'm all like, okay, I'm coming back. I'm thinking now, okay, 8 years, maybe I could pull it off if I just do this because I'm on an island by myself. Yeah, no, worst school year ever. Okay. And it was stuff that was so out of anybody's control that you just had to take it as a sign of, this is why I should not have been here in the first place. So what that looked like was the first week of school, my air goes out. I'm in the Southeast. It's hot. I'm in the throngs of menopause and I have no air. So I'm literally, it's like I'm sitting in a sauna. I'm so hot. That goes out. Then there's an issue with my class and somehow the kids were double booked. So then I start losing kids. So the response is, oh, well, let's give her some more kids. So like overnight, I go from like 9 or 10 kids to like 19, 20 kids. And granted, I've been in education a minute. I'm okay with classroom management. However, I get all these new kids, and guess what? Because we don't have air, we're not in my room. So the routines and stuff that I would teach, I can't teach because they're all connected to like my room and the space, and it was just a mess. So fast forward to, that's August. I want to say by 1st of September, after the first month of school, I was like, this is a mistake. I should not have come back. How in the world can I make this my last year? So at this point, I've decided 8 years is way too long. Let's try to do 8 months. Like, how in the world can I just get to May? And I kept praying and just, Lord, can you help? Like, is there something I'm missing? Is there something else I can do? So by, I want to say November, I had started being like, okay, I'm going to pull this off. Like, I'm going to figure this out. So I started applying for jobs. And I'm also at the same time looking at retiring early by buying my time back. My dad, God bless him, he's amazing with money. I'm his only child. Let me say again, he's amazing with money. So once I start telling him, hello, my love bug. Once I start telling him that, I'm really stressed at work, I'll have all this anxiety. I've just gotten a full-time job at Walmart so I can save up this money to buy my years back. So literally, y'all, for like, how long did I last at Walmart? I probably was at Walmart for like 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, I'm literally working from 7:45 to 11:45 at my teaching job. I'm getting off. I come home. I walk the dog. I have to be at Walmart at 2. I'm working at Walmart from 2 to 10. And so I did that for like 2 weeks. It was hilarious, y'all. And I loved every minute of Walmart. I'm not going to lie. I was a cashier. But unfortunately, the management was I was like, nope, not for me. So anyway, my dad was like, you know what? I'll give you to buy back. Like what I had done when I first started teaching is I like left the state that I was in and I pulled my money out of retirement. So when I was trying to buy the time back, that time wasn't that much. It may have been like maybe 12,000. So my dad was like, I'll send you that money. And I was like, okay. And, I guess as a modern woman, I was like, oh, I can't have all my eggs in one basket. Cause what if, he changes his mind and then I'm not going to have enough money to buy myself out at the end of this year. So I ended up, that's why I was at Walmart for like 2 weeks. Cause then once he sent the money, I was like, oh, okay, we're good to go. So I put that money to the side. And then as I was looking at the buying back the time, the issue is I would be penalized for early retirement. It was like 35%. But because I'd already made the switch from full-time to part-time, I was already used to working off of living off of half of what I make. And the cool thing is because I had taught full-time for so long, I mean, the difference wasn't going to be that much. It was like $1,000 difference between like what I make now and what I would have made. So I think at the time, it was going to be like maybe it might have been 2,700. And I bring home like 3,600 after taxes right now. So I was like, okay, I could pull that off. I said, I just need to find a job where I could make 1,000 a month. So I apply, I get a job as a librarian at a technical college. I'm excited. What this also allowed me to do, so I get this job at the end of December. And now I'm like, okay, in the meantime, I left out. In the meantime of working at Walmart, and so stuff was happening exponentially fast. It was really fast. So beginning of December, y'all, I'm still turning my wheels on trying to figure out how I'm getting ready to retire by May. Honey, by January 1st, I had already figured out how to finish by the end of January. So what happened was when I was looking at early retirement, they also had an option of disability retirement. And I was like, well, what is that? And so disability retirement is exactly what it sounds like. If the job is negatively impacting your health and you can show that, then you could potentially qualify for, disability. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, at this point, of course, my blood pressure is through the roof because the school year is crazy. I didn't even know your blood pressure was affected in real time like that. I thought it was like cholesterol where it takes a little bit to build up. But anyway, I'm anxious as everything. At this point, The doctors prescribed some, I think it was Zoloft, but I was like, I cannot take this because it made me so lethargic that I was like, God forbid if we have a school shooting, my reaction time would be so slow. So I was even more anxious. So it definitely was affecting me mentally, as well as physically. I think I had lost like 15, 20 pounds. So I definitely had the documentation to show like this job is really stressing me out. So I submitted the paperwork, and instead of doing early retirement, which would have ended up costing me about 35,000 because my out of state time was more expensive to buy. Well, excuse me, I could do early. I mean, I could do disability retirement, which means you don't get penalized for, that like percentage of how close you were to 30 years. Instead, you just get wherever you were at. Well, for me, because, excuse me, I think the last time I worked full time, I may have made like, it was 80 something thousand. So that's what it was based on. And I think it's like 60% of that or something. Well, luckily it worked out to be, I think like 3,000. So of course, if I'm bringing home 36 after taxes coming to work every day, and I can bring home 3,000, I was like, I'm gonna do this. Let's do this. So I submit the paperwork. I get everything in by January. Because I've interviewed and gotten this job now as a librarian, I can now break my contract because, of course, it's a different position. And, I'm really good at reading stuff. Yes, I've broken a contract before. So again, this was not something new. I did it like earlier in my career. So I was like, okay, cool. So I get approval from the district. I started the librarian job because, of course, the shift that I didn't make, because I really wasn't thinking this was going to go through, is I wasn't realizing that, okay, if this disability goes through, you're not going to be able to work this other job, which means you're going to be in the red. But, that thought hadn't even crossed my mind. Oh, excuse me. So, because I really wasn't thinking it was going to go through. I just thought, I'll just have to really get this real estate up and running. And I just felt like I knew I needed to leave teaching though. That was really like the thing. I just knew I'm exhausted. I don't want to do this in this capacity anymore. So that was really like the driving force. So to be, I guess, considerate of my job place and the children, I realized, okay, well, if the disability goes through, then this is going to screw my students and the school, because that means I'm going to be leaving like in the middle of the semester, and then what would they do? So what I did was once I got the library job, I gave a 2 weeks notice. And then that way, because we're on a block schedule and it was at the beginning of the semester, it was easy to just dissolve my class and put those kids in other electives. So like their schedule wasn't really disrupted for longer than like 2 weeks. So it was perfect. So the librarian job, unfortunately, did not work out because they told me I was too friendly, which really, seemed ridiculous because I'm like, I have a lot of energy. Who'd you think y'all were hiring? But at the technical college, they felt like, no, we're not trying to get to know the patrons. We really just help them. We don't ask them like what kind of classes they're taking and what are they in school for. And of course, as a teacher who's used to working with little ones, of course, I'm going to ask you that. Of course, I'm going to encourage you on your test and all that. So it just wasn't a good fit. And then once I realized that, it wasn't going to be like, at the time, it wasn't $1,000 difference. It was like 500 difference. If the disability went through, I was like, okay, well, no worries. I'll just, let me quit this. If it goes through, I can figure out a way to reduce my spending by like $500. So that's how I was able to pull off this early retirement, is that I did it under disability. Now, again, it is not for everybody. And just to kind of give you some bullet points, because it's almost 30 minutes long. So if you have watched this far, thank you. And I'm so sorry. Normally my videos, aren't longer than about 15 minutes. But the big thing is, because I had gone from full-time to part-time, that's how I was able to kind of make this leap, because the big leap had already happened. While I do have a real estate business, and at some point, yes, my income is going to look extremely different. Right now, it is really tight. It's super duper tight. I'll probably maybe do a series to walk you through like how I'm managing this money because what I didn't take into account was now that the disability is approved, I cannot work another job. So I do have to figure out a way to decrease my expenses by almost $900 because I was bringing home like what, 36, and now I'm bringing home like 27 because after insurance and taxes, it drops it down a little bit. Although I must say the health insurance is amazing, y'all. I'm paying less than $100, so I'm not complaining. And I end up getting like a cheaper car. And so I'll walk you through that in like some upcoming videos. But just a quick recap. The very first thing I want you to think about is, one, you can always try. You can always try. Now, I don't know your situation. I am blessed to be single, which means, I'm not affecting really anybody else. My child's quality of life didn't change. So I don't kind of have a partner who may be, not the most supportive. I don't have anybody. So it kind of worked out in that sense. Although the flip side of that is it was kind of scary because if it didn't work out, I'm the only person I can count on. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword. But really think about how you can decrease your expenses. The second thing to remember is if you're already penny pinching, which most teachers are, if you start thinking kind of in terms of like rich dad, poor dad, and you start looking at, okay, maybe I can't make my entire teaching salary from one source, because it's what we tend to think about, especially if you're like my age or older. If you're over 50, then of course we tend to think all our money needs to come from one source, but it doesn't necessarily. So for me, what started happening last year when I was thinking about, subbing, is that I was like, okay, I bring home $3,600 a month. How can I make $3,600? And then if you look at like, okay, well, maybe like, how can I make $1,000 a week? And so, yeah, it could be from part-time teaching. It could be from tutoring. It could be from DoorDash. It could be from like multiple sources. And then you start to think, even though it's from multiple sources and it's taking up more time, the cognitive demand is so different that it doesn't feel like it. So what that means is the 4 hours that I was teaching felt like 8 hours. Whereas when I was working 8 hours as a Walmart cashier, felt like 4 hours. So, you got to kind of shift your mind in that case. So the second suggestion I would have is, even if you're not trying to leave, or you might want to just go from full-time to part-time from your job, is start looking at how you can start making some other income in other places. And it doesn't have to be a ridiculous amount. Like you could just start thinking, oh, if I do DoorDash could cover my car note, or DoorDash could cover my utilities, or if I tutor, that could cover my car insurance. If you start looking at it like that, then you realize, oh, you can get up to your teaching salary pretty quickly. And also, number one, though, really scaling back on what's important to you and spend the money there. And so for me, I was a really, really big traveler. I've not taken a vacation in 6 years because I had to make a choice. Like, okay, Michelle, you cannot do both. You can't still be hopping on and off planes, getting passport stamps, and working part-time. So what is more important to you right now? And for me, it was working part-time. To me, it felt like a vacation every day that I got off of work at 11:45. So I'm okay with that. I'm hoping that this year, before December 31st, I'm able to afford a trip, but we'll see. So I would say just try it out, even in like a little micro way, because if you think about it, the worst that could happen is it doesn't work and you just have to go back to, teaching. But the flip side is if it does work, then you find yourself in a totally different space and season in life. And you're like, oh my God, I can't even believe this is my life, because that is where I am right now. Because literally I was trying to make it to May, which means I would still have like, another month of school. Whereas I left teaching January 17th and I left the library job like February 7th. So y'all, I've not had like a job in like a couple months. And I'll make a video about that because that hasn't been all sunshines and rainbows either, but it's been great. And just a renewed excitement about life and not feeling stuck and not waking up every morning dreading, oh my God, I gotta go to work. Or, Sundays feel so different now. Like, I'm not like, how many more weeks? I still always know how many Mondays are left because I used to keep track of that. And of course, my child is in school, so I do kind of know that. But again, I hope this has inspired you. And even if you're not in a financial position to go and quit a job or go from full-time to part-time, just at least start playing around with the idea of like, how can I, start saving up a little bit so that it'll give me a little bit of wiggle room. And if you're a teacher, I would say try not to call off, y'all, because them sick days kicked my butt. Like I could have probably had 2 to 3 years in sick days had I not been like calling off here and there. But of course, if you're tired and you're stressed and you're anxious, I get it. You got to take care of your brain, which is what I'm on a mission to do right now. But yeah, just I hope you are encouraged. I hope that I've given somebody some ideas, because even I'm telling y'all, life got amazing when I went from full-time to part-time, because that meant no meetings, only if I wanted to, and I was on my own time. No duties, no responsibility for a club. Like I really just got to teach for 4 hours a day, and it really was a cool thing. But I think that was just the gateway into, I think it's probably time to do something else. I would like to go back into the world of education and maybe do like some sort of financial literacy classes or volunteer with kids. But right now, my focus is definitely getting this real estate up and running so that I can supplement my income as quickly as possible. But yeah, I hope everybody got a little something from it. Again, thank you for watching as long as you did. And so that's how I pulled it off. It's under disability. And yes, it is, a little bit of a pay cut, but it's not as much for me because I already took the big pay cut from, when I went full-time to part-time. So that's how I did it. Hope I gave you some ideas. I hope if nothing else, just be encouraged that, it can be done. And even if you can't shave off 8 years, maybe you could shave off a year or 2 years or 3 years. It all adds up in the end. Trust me. So until later, be grateful. And I will definitely take you all along on this ride of how I'm managing this money and cutting expenses and making ends meet. But thank you again and have a great day. Bye-bye.